Extra time.
Hello and welcome back to the Extra Time podcast. It's me, your host, Patrick van Straaten, broadcasting to you from my loft today. And I'm joined by Henry Hill. Hello, Henry. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. I like the change of scene. Looks nice. I was wearing a shirt before this, but I've had to accept that my family home, irrelevant of the season, is the coldest house in the UK. I'm pretty confident. So I've had to give in. Honestly, it could be 40 degrees outside, and I still think my living room would be some ice cube. So yeah, I've had to reluctantly accept defeat on the shirt front. But yeah, other than that, I'm really well. Sun is shining. Still working from home. What's not to love about that?
Yeah, it's I suppose the cold is the downside of working in of being in such a drafty mansion like the Henry Hill family palace.
Honestly, they switched off the Argo this weekend, and that is a real blow to the.
This is why I'm in the loft today, because when I'm speaking to Henry Hill, only the penthouse will do.
Oh god, this isn't going to do me any favours.
It's fine.
The fans.
Well, we're kind of talking about the Premier League. Not quite the penthouse today, I suppose. The floor below. We're talking about the runners and riders for the UEL places.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult one this season, because in the past we've talked about there being, a top six and then the bottom few teams, then a Premier League middle class. And this season, it's an absolute mess. So currently, the teams between 5th and 10th are separated by 8 points. Fewer than that if Aston Villa win their game in hand. And that group includes West Ham, Aston Villa. It includes underperforming bigger teams like Spurs and Arsenal. And then it includes reigning champions Liverpool. So it's an incredibly strange bunch of sides. And the goal difference in this group ranges from plus 19 all the way down to plus 3 for Everton.
Goodness.
So I have no idea what to make of it. But I think the first question, Henry, has to be, how do we see the top 4 shaping up? Because we can't really discuss what we see happening in the 5th to 10th spots without deciding whether any of these teams are likely to break out of that group and into the top 4, right?
Yeah, I think the top 4 is as it is right now. So I think we can settle, obviously, City first. I think United have definitely got enough to come second. Leicester, Iheanacho coming to form, I think, is just so important, isn't it? I think so. That might just be the boost they need to get them over the line. Also, no Europa League football to focus on as well. So they've just got the FA Cup, which, it's really exciting. Once again, a really exciting season for Leicester fans. They've got that and the Premier League to look forward to. I'd be amazed if they slipped up in the same way as last year. And then Chelsea are probably other than City, the informed team, aren't they, right now? So I think it's a fair assumption to settle on the top 4, maybe as it looks, especially like if you consider that 5th is West Ham. None of the teams beyond them look like they could necessarily go on the kind of streak to knock any of those top 4 out. So yeah, I'm happy if you're happy to settle on the top 4 in its current format.
I think so. I mean, like, Leicester are quite clearly the weakest of the top 4, but their points gap down to Liverpool, for example, who I think are probably the likeliest candidates to break in, is 10 points at the moment? Like, it's pretty substantial. And Chelsea, who are closest on points to the teams kind of competing to get in there, like you say, are in excellent form. And their next few fixtures, Chelsea, they've got West Brom, Palace, Brighton, then West Ham, Fulham, City, Arsenal, Leicester. So those few games, I mean, their last few games of the season are tough. But before we get to that, they've got maybe 3 easy wins. And that might be enough at this stage to get you over the line. Like, we've got so few games left that losing 5 points in the course of 9 matches is actually quite a big ask.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I also think no side is going to want to face Chelsea either. So every side will consider that a game they'll probably lose points on as well. So I think we can safely assume that Chelsea are fine. And yeah, I think we will. Across the channel, you're going to see a bit more about Thomas Tuchel and a look at what he's done in the coming few weeks. Yeah, because, fair play to him. He's done incredibly. But if we start with West Ham, and I guess it's a good place to start, really, because obviously you're an Arsenal fan. We can maybe sort of bounce off this game yesterday, which was that 3-3 draw. That kind of, I don't know about, just quickly on the game, for me, that epitomised everything that's right and wrong with the Mikel Arteta era. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of, it was West Ham obviously dominated Arsenal, start off with, and then Arsenal showed this kind of heroic coming back spirit and looked really effective. But I don't know if you could, as an Arsenal fan, walk away from that happy. I mean, yeah, it's all well and good, but no side should be 3-0 down that quickly. And it's well done, they rescued the situation, but surely you're concerned about a lot of what you saw yesterday.
Yes and no. I mean, you're right. Like, it's just like kind of what Arteta's team looks like. But the good thing about the fact that Arsenal have conceded, I think, something like, I think the majority of goals we've conceded since Christmas, and when I say the majority, I mean like 75%, have been like the product of individual errors. I mean, like, seriously, like, guys just giving the ball away, like Xhaka basically booting it off Chris Wood into the back of the net, things like that. The good thing about that is it means that you can replace probably a couple of error-prone players in the team, and it might really help that. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, players are always going to make errors, and if a team is making lots and lots of errors all the time, then that says something about the system they're being asked to play. It's a system which kind of maximizes the damage when a player does do something stupid. But Arsenal do undeniably have several exceptionally stupid players in the team. Like, it really annoys me, I think, when I see people say someone like Granit Xhaka is like not a good passer, or, you know, that he just passes it backwards and sideways. No, he doesn't. He passes forward all the time. That is the last of Xhaka's problems. His problem is that he's an idiot. His problem is that he's got absolutely no brain at all. He's also, you know, not got a good right foot, but he's got no brain at all, and he does silly things all the time. And the same goes for David Luiz. And yet David Luiz is the guy at the moment who always keeps his spot in the back line, and it's then rotated, you know, the other centre back slot between Gabriel, who's obviously been coming back from injury, between Pablo Mari. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like one or two upgrades in key positions probably helps quite a bit, you know? But I was sort of heartened, because in the early days of the season, if Arsenal went a goal behind, there was absolutely no chance that we'd be able to create anything when chasing the game. So it is really positive that in this game, Arsenal were chasing and created a lot. Like, we're really dangerous in the second half against a team which I think is excellent. I think this is a really good West Ham side. Like, they're rock solid. They've got really good attacking players. They know their defensive scheme super well. So I thought, away from home at a tough side, that's a pretty encouraging attacking performance in the second half. And from my point of view, I don't hold out hopes for the rest of the season in the league for Arsenal. You know, like, if Arsenal want anything from this season, then surely it's got to come in the Europa League, where now you'd probably say that they're the second best side left in it after Man United, depending what we think of teams like Ajax, you know, which is quite hard to gauge. So I kind of don't mind it too much. I look at this team and I think it's pretty young. Someone like Pepe has been really good recently, and that's encouraging as well. Guys like Saka, Smith Rowe and Odegaard have really come on well. I'm not too worried about it, you know? Like, yes, you're right. It showcases the best and worst of Mikel Arteta's side. But fortunately, this season, unlike the end of last season, when I was really annoyed at how complacent Arsenal fans were being, I think everyone goes into this summer knowing that there's lots of work to do, not just with transfers, but on the training ground. And that's a good position for the club to be in. I didn't like the way that the FA Cup win made everyone think that everything was going fine last year. I think that was really, really stupid.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's just I just find Arsenal probably my second team. Truth be told, I've got a real soft spot and affinity for them. But if you look at their transfer record over the last 5 years, even some of the transfer decisions of last summer, and I guess just the fact that they have lost as many games as they have this season. I mean, into double figures for defeats, 11 overall. That it really isn't the Arsenal way. And there was a lot of backlash on Twitter. I saw yesterday being like, would other managers, would Unai Emery be criticised if this has happened during his Arsenal reign? I think there's a lot of kind of charity going towards Arteta right now, which I think is great, because often football is way too reactive and way too quick to sort of shut someone down when it's not going too well. And I think it's great that he is being given time, and quite clearly there is a project. But I still think losing 11 times this season is a concern. It's not even in a transitional year. There are ways to shut up shop to kind of avoid that kind of humiliation in certain regards. And I just thought that dropping 3-0, albeit against a very good West Ham side yesterday, it does raise a few more questions for me. But yeah, I agree with you. If we look at in terms of where they would finish if they could get into the Europa League, I think it might be a bit of a stretch. What are they? 4 points behind Everton, who've got a game in hand at the moment. Liverpool, I still think could be a recovery. We'll get on to these guys in a minute. But yeah, Arsenal was an interesting one. I personally, for me, agree with you. I think the Europa League, unless Unai Emery comes back to haunt you with Villarreal in the semi-finals. And apparently, what was it? He's 20 knockout matches undefeated in the Europa League, Unai Emery, as a manager, which is pretty cool. That's a pretty amazing stat, isn't it?
I mean, it is amazing. It's like Pep in the Carabao Cup. But I mean, what I will say is that I would, out of these teams, I think that Arsenal and West Ham are probably joint second best. Like, since Christmas, Arsenal's form has been very good, and that's taking into account, like games like the Wolves game, which was a bit weird, or the Burnley game, like where, frankly, they shot themselves in the foot. Like, I think Liverpool are the best of these sides, and then it's between West Ham and Arsenal. To me, that puts Arsenal out of the running to finish, 5th or 6th, because there are too many teams ahead of them, and they're not the best of these sides. So my argument here is I think it's Liverpool and West Ham 5th and 6th. I'm not entirely sure in which order, but I'd probably give Liverpool the edge overall. So I'd probably go Liverpool 5th, West Ham 6th. And then the question is whether Arsenal and Villa, who I think are substantially better than Spurs and Everton, can reel those sides in given the points deficit they have.
Well, I think this is where we might differ quite a lot, which is actually quite interesting. Just to give people a bit of context, I had a look at West Ham's fixtures. West Ham tend to struggle against the bigger sides. David Moyes' record against the Big Four, the classic Big Four, is pretty abysmal. And in their running, they've got Chelsea, which they play at home, to be fair, and they play Leicester City at home. And the rest are all bottom of the table sides, finishing off with Brighton, West Brom and Southampton. So yeah, I actually think there's a really solid chance. Newcastle and Burnley, they play as well. So I think West Ham, they've weathered the storm of the tough sides. I think it's fair to say they will finish, in my opinion, in the top 2. And it's great as well, because it's like a testament to squad building. It's a testament to kind of rooting out, because West Ham obviously went down that path of going after these big name signings and trying to get a bit more shine and dazzle to their squad. And I think David Moyes, if you combine the fact that he's been there over 2 spells, he's worked with a lot of the original players in his first spell, he's come back and worked with them again. He's had time to get to know his players and really develop characters within the side and bring correct characters into the squad. And I think that's a real testament to him. So I think it's like good for football in a funny way if West Ham do finish strongly, because it's kind of like everything you'd like to see. It's obviously West Ham get a lot of criticism for their owners and whatnot, but to be fair to them, they've put together a squad with the right personalities to succeed, and that's why essentially, Sheffield United losing Chris Wilder is such a hammer blow, because he was the glue keeping them together. He was the thing that elevated that whole side. Really, it was his mentality, and that's why I think, although they did play well against Chelsea at the weekend, it must be said, they will struggle. So yeah, I'm really happy for West Ham United. But if we go back to the kind of other side, what we were saying there. For me, it sounds silly, but I still like bet on Tottenham to do well. I just feel like all the media coverage around Mourinho is so heightened. I think it's just what happened in Zagreb was abysmal. There's no two ways about that. But I really consummate 2-0 victory yesterday. I think when you've got Harry Kane in the form that he's in, I don't think you can really write them off right now. Certainly, I got a lot of stick for saying Lucas Moura wasn't as bad as people were saying on the Football Daily WhatsApp chat. Sure enough, he's kind of showing up and being useful. I think there's enough talent in there for them to stay competitive. They're still on 48 points. They're still only 3 behind Chelsea. It's not like people seem to think that Tottenham they've lost a lot of games, but they had a few points in the bank, which they've able to keep themselves in the race. And I still think, certainly compared to Everton, that Tottenham are a better proposition.
They're definitely better than Everton. I agree that Everton are the worst in this group by quite a long way, I think. but Tottenham have been pretty bad since Christmas. Pretty bad. Like, the defence is mid-table since Christmas. I think it's 9th best in the league. They're a little bit lucky, I think, that Son's injury has coincided with the international break, because it looks like he'll be back straight afterwards. But this was a side that early in the season was pressing really high. And actually, I was quite positive about Mourinho. Like, I wrote a scout report about Mourinho and how he was doing different things from before. Like, the team was pressing high. They were getting loads of shots. Like, they genuinely looked good after the Everton game anyway. And since then, they're exactly in the stats what you'd expect them to be. Like, no team, they and Wolves catch players offside the least, which I think really shows how deep they play. They now take fewer shots than they allow, which is insane, really. Like, they take 11 shots a game, they allow 12.2. There's no good side that does that. There just isn't. Like, that will eventually bite you. Kane and Son have been amazing this season, but they've also both played out of their minds. Like, they've scored at way above expectation. And, great, that's good for them. That's really good individual performance. But you can't bank on that happening every single week. Like, so to me, like, yes, Kane is in amazing form. And I understand that Kane being in amazing form means Spurs always have a chance. But there's also the side of it that Kane has been in amazing form. And this team still is not that good in the numbers. And that, to me, is concerning. And I do think that tactically, they're starting to do things that worry me. I mean, I say starting. They've been doing them for a while now. But, like, the way they played in the North London derby, I thought was concerning. Like, concerning. That's true. Like, the Zagreb thing, shit happens. I get that. Like, and it happened in a really bad way. Like, sometimes that match happens and you can squeeze a goal and you manage to go through, or you only concede 2 and the third one hits the post, Like a lot of the time you kind of get away with that. But if you do stuff like you did in the North London derby every week, you're not going to get away with it over the course of a season. You're just not. I mean, the one advantage for them now is they're out of the UEL, so they can conserve their better players for the Premier League. The only other thing they've got coming up is the Carabao Cup final, which, I kind of think Mourinho will care more about that, right? Because Spurs aren't going to make top 4, so he kind of doesn't care where they finish in the league. He just wants to win that trophy so he can say, well, I won a trophy, and keep that record. But I don't know. I look at Spurs now, and if I had to play any of these teams, had to like bank on my team getting 3 points against any of these sides, Everton would be my first choice, Spurs would be my second choice.
By virtue of finishing runners-up in the League Cup or winning the League Cup, he would get a Europa League spot anyway. Is that right? Am I
yeah, but I don't think he cares that. I don't think he cares that much about that. I don't know. Isn't that the FA Cup? I don't really know how that works anymore, but I don't think he cares about that. Like, I really don't. I think that he'd take a trophy over that. Like, because that is, I don't know, even though he probably knows in his heart it's dishonest to claim that winning the Carabao Cup matters. And I think that Spurs fans who are desperate for a trophy will win the Carabao Cup and then realise they don't actually feel that happy. Like, if it doesn't actually matter to them. But I think he wants it because then he gets to at least make his argument that he wins everywhere he goes. If he doesn't win it and they finish, 7th or 8th, especially if they get caught by Arsenal, it's going to get really, really hard for the club to ignore calls for his head. Like, they need to finish above Arsenal or win the Carabao Cup, but ideally both, really.
Oh, it is tricky. People think we seem to hate Mourinho on this channel, but I think I know Doogie loves him too, and it is impossible to ignore the issues that seem to continuously emerge. But I still think with maybe one more round of transfers, this Spurs side could do something. It's just, maybe the mentality of their play, because like you said, the North London derby, especially off the back of 3 straight wins and a kind of a return to attacking form, to sort of dropped off that significantly against the side which West Ham showed that if you take it to them, cracks will appear. It was giantly concerning. So yeah, maybe you're right. But if we certainly look at the other sides, I still back them to do something like Aston Villa. If we just go to Aston Villa quickly, is there an argument that Jack Grealish just really does elevate that side to a point that without him, they're not nearly as good? Because we've seen it before. I try to think of some previous examples, but their form without Jack Grealish is concerning. I think they've won 1 in 6 games where he hasn't appeared this season. They've hardly scored in that period too. He's the reason that's made players like Ollie Watkins look very impressive, even Bertrand Traore, El Ghazi and stuff like that. He's out until early April at least, which is really concerning if you consider, well, I guess the international break comes now, but do you think he'll be able to like jump back in and keep Aston Villa? Because I don't think I've seen enough of them, certainly since Christmas, to suggest that they've got what it takes to finish in the top 8. But I also don't think it matters. I think whatever they achieve is an amazing result for them this season if we compare where they were last year. But yeah, for me, Aston Villa don't feature. But I mean, do you think that the quality of Jack Grealish and certainly their keeper has elevated our general attitude towards this Aston Villa side, or do you think they are as good as their league position suggests, irrelevant of those two players?
No, they're obviously substantially worse without those two players. But I think the same could be said of most teams if you take away their best player. Teams in this kind of neck of the woods. Like if you took Declan Rice out of West Ham, I think they'd be in serious trouble. Less so Arsenal. I guess Arsenal don't have like a single star who's been dragging them this season in the way Aubameyang did in the last couple of years. If you took Kane out of Spurs, definitely. If you took Dominic Calvert-Lewin out of Everton, we saw what happened there, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, though the interesting thing about Villa is actually, I think the problem for them lately has been the defence. Like, yes, they've been worse without Grealish, but the attack's actually still pretty good. But in the first half of last season, they were one of the worst defensive sides in the league. They were god-awful.
Yeah.
Then over the hiatus, the COVID hiatus, they obviously improved defensively. And when they came back in Project Restart, they were one of the best defensive sides in the league. And they started this season that way again. And now the defence has totally crumbled again. And people aren't really talking about it that much. And I don't understand it. And Grealish has nothing to do with that. Like, I suppose you can make the argument that when Grealish is on the pitch, maybe teams play a bit more conservatively, knowing he's there. But he's not a guy who's going to run in behind, so I'm not sure how true that is. But before Christmas, they allowed 12 expected goals in 12 games. Really, really good defensive record. Really good. Since Christmas, they've allowed 24 expected goals in 16 games, which is one of the worst defensive records in the league. Like, their defense has absolutely fallen apart. And it's really been Martinez keeping them in games. And that is an interesting issue for me, because I think they need to... Grealish coming back is going to improve them, but unless they have a think about how that's going to be improved, the defensive situation over the international break, they're going to be in trouble because their run-in is rough. They've got Fulham up next, which is a tougher game, as we know, than it has been previously. Then they've got Liverpool, Man City, Everton, Man United, Tottenham and Chelsea all before the end of the season. That is a horrific run-in. And while I'd say they're better than Everton, they're better than Fulham, they might be better than Tottenham. I don't know. They're certainly inferior to City, Liverpool, Man United and Chelsea. And given that they are 10th here, I know they have a game in hand on Arsenal, but given those fixtures, it's probably a game in hand against a tough team. I don't really think that they've got that much of a shot. I really like Villa. I think they're a good side. I actually think that over the course of the season, they've been better than most of those sides ahead of them. But yeah, there's something going on with the defence there. And I still think they're lacking a really quality defensive midfielder. I like Marvelous Nakamba fine. I think Douglas Luiz is super overrated. They need a real defensive presence in there because at the moment they're in trouble.
I completely agree. I was just about to say, I was just looking at some of their midfield stats now, and John McGinn is the most active of those central midfielders when it comes to defensive actions per game, and he's not really a world class. So if you said what's John McGinn's best attributes, I don't think you'd say his defensive work rate. I think going forward he's a lot more effective. A great midfielder, don't get me wrong, but I completely agree with you. I think a lot of their midfielders would be heightened or complemented by a world-class central defensive midfielder. The way that Ndidi operates at Leicester City, in the way that he allows like Tielemans to become that box-to-box kind of guy, and Maddison obviously to push on like that. So yeah, I certainly agree with you there. They are probably a defensive midfielder away from being a really excellent team if they can hold on to Grealish. But I just think Like I said before, I think finishing in the top 10 is a remarkable achievement for them and testament to Dean Smith as well. You're right. I wrote about the Aston Villa, kind of what they did in Project Restart, and a lot of it was to do with they realised they were just trying to take too many risks. There's a lot to be said. Yeah, obviously playing out from the back is like the dream, but they just realised they were just putting themselves in a lot of situations where they were just giving the opposition the opportunities to catch them out, and they just went a bit more blunt with it and sort of pumping the ball forwards. And also they learned to like take more responsibility as players on the pitch and get people to talk up. And someone like Konsa, who was very quiet and I think sort of overshadowed by certainly Mings, he's become a lot more of like a leader on the pitch. And I think, you can see Joe's banging the drum for him to go to the Euros. You can see that kind of elevation in his game there. So yeah, maybe they just need to get back to that. Just maybe recognise the fact that they don't have an amazing shield in front of them. Maybe they should be a bit more robust and sort of simplistic in their tactics. I think we saw when they lost the ball against Tottenham for the first goal, that it completely melted apart. It was complete panic at the back, wasn't it? It was a real kind of chaos back there. But I mean, yeah, top 10 for Villa would be a remarkable result. But I don't think that European football is quite in their reach, considering the teams around them. If we kind of look at if we go to Everton, then I'll be really intrigued to see what you think about them, because what can you constitute as a successful season for them, really, when they've got a world-class team? And I think Ancelotti, what he's done with this group of players is amazing. I think he's improved a number of their players, but you still worry. They're not the most attacking team at all. I think they have, possession-wise, they don't actually hold on to the ball that much compared to the other top teams in the top 10, certainly. And I think their shots per game are around 11. So they're not the most inventive aside, certainly with James Rodriguez when he's missing, because he has been injured a lot this season. Where do you think they could finish? Because I think it could be another season of disappointment for Everton, although in a weird way, really positive in terms of the progression of the side under Ancelotti. But I don't think that it's going to be reflected in this heavily congested table.
It's difficult, isn't it? Like the thing is, they made some short-term bets this season. They were like, we're going to get in James. He's 29, but he's amazing. We're going to get in Alan, who's 29 and used to be amazing and is now still pretty good. We're going to get in Doucouré, who I think is like mediocre, but sure, he's a certain sort of player that if you want him, like, you should know what you're getting from him. They tried to do different things with him, didn't really work. And we've got really good couple of forwards in Richarlison and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But the rest of the squad is pretty thin, right? Like, especially at the back. There have been times this season where they've been playing 4 centre-backs across the back line.
Yeah.
And weirdly, a couple of years ago, they had an absolutely colossal squad, and they've been dealing with that ever since. Like, we said at the time that's going to be an issue, and it has been, because, like, now they've had to kind of, like, let other people go, and it means that they've got quite a disjointed team. Like, if they could have kept Moise Kean and, like, played him when Calvert-Lewin was injured, that would have gone a long way to helping them out. If they'd had the space in the squad to bring in Djibril Sidibe permanently last summer after his really good season with them last year, I think that would have helped as well. Like there are things they might have been able to do if they didn't have guys like, Bernard still on the books.
He's not just on the books, by the way. Bernard is paid something like 140k a week. It's just Jesus. It's one of those free signings where clearly he was like, well, you can have me for free, but you have to give me a bumper pay deal. And you do look at it and you think that's classic Everton in many ways, isn't it? But it's pretty poor.
Oh, well, that was the period they went through where they just did absolutely insane things. They paid like 30 mil for like Yannick Bolasie, and I think gave him really high wages. They gave Theo Walcott high wages when he was like clearly past it at Arsenal. And I love Theo Walcott. Like, I mean, there were loads of these guys who were just kind of coasting into middle age on 100k a week, and Gylfi among them, and that's a little bit worrying. But they've got a good core there. Like, I'm still very positive about the core of that side, or at least Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin, Iwobi, Davies. Like, those are guys I like. And then they've got some other useful people around. Like Godfrey looks like a really good signing for them. I don't really know. I think that Ancelotti has done a great job this season. I think that this is a a weirdly built squad. It's thin in certain areas and thick in others. They've had some terrible injuries. They've had COVID problems. I think they're lucky to be where they are. I think they should probably be around 10th, maybe 11th. But I still think it's been a good season of progression for them. I think that Richarlison, they've really struggled for goals without Calvert-Lewin. That's the one thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a bad finishing season for almost everyone there except Calvert-Lewin, right? So the top scorer after Calvert-Lewin is Richarlison with 6 league goals, which is pretty poor. But I think if Hammers hadn't got injured, things would be a lot better. So it's been a bit of a perfect storm for Everton. And as well, you know, the poor performances over the last couple of months have been thrown into relief by the incredible start they made to the season. Like, I think if they'd had the kind of performances they've had lately at the beginning of the season, and then now we're having the performances they had at the beginning of the season, you know, like if the form were the other way round, so they were bad and then good instead of good and then bad, people would be like talking up Everton, even if they were in this same position. People would be saying, you know, Everton are great. Ancelotti's doing an amazing job, like really excited about Everton. But because those good results came early on, everybody's kind of saying, oh my God, what's going on? Like, we thought Everton were going to get into the top 4. Well, actually, overall, Everton have been this all season. They're like a pretty patchy side with some significant squad building issues to be resolved. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm very positive about Ancelotti. But this summer, in order to feel good about Everton, I want to see them not go out and buy, you know, another few 29-year-olds this summer. They need to go out this year and buy some peak or pre-peak players, like some kind of 22 to 26s, I think. Because that's the issue with the squad at the moment. You can very quickly become very old if you just have 2 summers of buying 28, 29-year-olds.
I think I'd love to see them go big for someone like Ivan Toney at Brentford. I think a lot
Is that an area they need to strengthen? Is that like a problem area?
Well, I think he could probably play on the flank as well, dropping kind of similar to what Richarlison could do. I think he's as an out and out forwards that Richarlison that when Dominic Calvert-Lewin isn't available, I think he could sort of play both roles there, and I think his numbers have been significantly better for Brentford without the assistance that Watkins had during his time with Benrahma, etc. So I think they need, and like you said, Richarlison's never been like a massive goal scorer, has he? He's and actually I think his all-round game this year has significantly improved. He's actually been he's playing out on the left, dropping back. His defensive work rate's improved. His carries from deep have been excellent this season. But I still think that side could be complemented with a third presence to make that a really formidable front three. And I think Toney would probably be around the 40 million mark. I think that's the kind of signing they would make. But I agree with you. I also think they should go in for Max Aarons as well from right back from Norwich City potentially as well. I think whether or not they're
interesting.
Hopefully they don't price them out some silly move, but I think he'd fit in really well there. Ben Godfrey, etc. These are like more kind of signings they should be looking to make as opposed to. I agree with you. They've got a kind of. They're slowly eking out that congested midfield, which is like the mix mash of quite a few managerial stints in charge. Marco Silva, Sam Allardyce, etc. There's still these kind of signings that have been meshed together, and they're still slowly fading a few of those out. So yeah, I do think another season. I hope, like I said earlier about West Ham, I hope a lot of certainly clubs at boardroom level are realising that you just need to give 3 years or so to a lot of these managers to really create a team in their image. Do you know what I mean? I think that was lost for a long period of time. The Premier League just seemed to completely lose sight of that as a reality of how to manage a club. But yeah, this season, I read a stat that Schalke have fired more managers than the entirety of the Premier League this year, which is really like reassuring, in my opinion. But hopefully another year of Ancelotti being allowed to do what he can do. And people forget how congested it is at the top level. But yeah, I agree with you. Everton could be hugely exciting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, should we stay in Merseyside? Because I kind of think I'm really intrigued by Liverpool. Like, I don't know what this does to them. Like, we've both agreed that we think they're unlikely to make the top 4. Even though the underlying numbers across the course of the season probably put them about 4th. They've still got an excellent attack. They've got a pretty good run in. But if they don't finish in the top 4, what do they do? Like, because people are saying, oh, well, they have to sell one of their front 3. To be honest, I've said all along, I've been saying for about 2 years that this was the summer that I think they need to sell one of the front 3. Like, because Mane is going to be 29 in a couple of weeks. Salah is going to be 29 in June. Firmino is going to be 30 in the autumn. You want to sell one of those people while their value is high and reinvest. The issue with that I have this year is that I'm not sure anyone's going to have the money to go and pay for one of those people. I think most clubs have got a bit smarter as well, as in, I think clubs... So in the past where you could go and flog one of these guys to, like Barcelona or Real Madrid. Barcelona, I don't think have the money. Real Madrid have been bitten really, really hard by signing like a 28, 29-year-old Eden Hazard and have seen the drop-off that happened there. So they might not go in hard for another player of that age. There are always teams like Inter Milan who are possible, but they're in financial trouble as well. So I don't know if Liverpool can actually get the money that they'd want for one of these guys. And so I'm not sure whether this summer Liverpool are going to be forced, where people are saying Liverpool are going to have to sell one of these players because they haven't made the top 4. I think they might actually be forced to keep all these players because, firstly, there aren't any buyers available for them at the right price point. And secondly, if they did sell one of them and they had to go and buy a new forward, they may not have the same level of forward available to them as they would have done had they made the Champions League. Like, if they'd made the Champions League, they might have been able to say, okay, well, we're not going to get the 90 million we hoped for Mane or something, but we'll take like 50 or 60 for one of these guys because we can go and spend, because we can go and get like Haaland or something, or Sancho. But now, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. Like, so that concerns me. I just don't know what they're going to do like this summer, and I think that being in the Champions League is clearly part of the plan. Like, it has to be for a team like Liverpool. I'm really intrigued to see what they look like next year.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about kind of the big transfers. On the most recent episode of Continental Club, we reviewed all the £100 million plus transfers. There's been 8. And the majority of those just haven't worked. It's just such a risky tactic. Ironically, the big ones, Neymar and Mbappe, have probably been the most successful, which is sort of fair play to PSG. But the rest, like Griezmann, was he worth 100 million? Not really. I mean, João Felix, the jury's out on whether or not they overpaid there. So yeah, I think the appetite. I think Bayern Munich, they always said, like, you'll never see us paying that kind of money because it never really works. And the one time they did, what was Hernandez? They paid like 80 million? Is that right?
Yeah, something like that, 72.
But even that is like a huge price to pay for a player. And I think you almost felt uncomfortable for Bayern doing that. So yeah, I completely agree. I don't know. But I still think like Firmino, I still think there's a club that would pay 35, 40 million. But is that disrespectful to Firmino to suggest that much? But I mean, the idea that these players would push to leave Liverpool if they don't get the Champions League, I think, is hugely disrespectful to Liverpool and to what they've achieved under Klopp during this period. I'd be amazed if you've obviously seen Salah's agent being a bit of a, quite frankly, on Twitter and kind of trying to create more drama, I suppose, than necessarily is. But I don't think, in terms of these players pushing to leave, I don't think any of them. I think it'd be completely disrespectful to Liverpool and everything they've managed if they did do that. So I'm concerned. But I agree with you. I don't know who on earth is going to pay that kind of money that they're looking for those players. And I think Firmino is probably the only one where they could get a sort of... I still think a lot of clubs look at that as a £30 million signing and think, yeah, you know what, that is pretty decent. I think, would he go to someone like Dortmund as a Haaland replacement? I mean, it's difficult to say after everything he's achieved. But yeah, I don't think a year out of the Champions League is going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to Liverpool. We've seen Chelsea have kind of went through that cycle of doing that, didn't they? They sort of 2 years in the Champions League, 1 year out or so. It's more concerning for Arsenal when you reach a situation where you're sort of consistently outside of the top 4. But for Liverpool, I don't think they'll be rushed to panic too much. They'll still have money available because I don't think their net spend hasn't been significantly huge over the last few years. And if they could just go out and find a striker, which I think last time we talked about it, how frustrating it is that they just don't use a lot of their players on the bench. If they just go out and get a striker who can maybe complement Jota and maybe complement Firmino, I think, and there will always be the desire in the pool to go to Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp, and I think £40 million, they could probably get someone who could slot in and at least continue that kind of trend of 10, 15 goals per season.
I agree that I don't think any of those guys will push to leave. It's more that I think Liverpool were probably banking on selling one of them for a large sum of money this year.
Yeah.
Like, this would have been the time to do it. And while I'm not suggesting that Mane and Salah are on the verge of like totally dropping off, Firmino I'm a little bit less sure on. It is possible that one or two of them like really goes down next year. Like, either gets a serious injury, or their numbers just start to drop, because that is what happens at that age. I think the team as a whole will be better. But then you might find that next year, rather than having an incredibly valuable asset, you have a guy who you're not going to get enough money for that you could justify it to the fans. Like if somebody comes in with an £80 million bid for 30-year-old Firmino, you can explain that to fans. But if next year Firmino has had like a pretty bad year and somebody comes in with like a 35 million pound bid for a 31-year-old Firmino, I think fans are going to be a little bit cross if you sell him. And that's the difficulty for me. And I agree that you can go out and find these 40 million pound guys, but I think those guys need to be supplemented by the people who are already there. Otherwise, what you're saying is what you were saying 4 years ago, which is we can maybe win the title in 4 years. And then the question is, does Klopp want to stick around for another 4 or 5 year cycle? Like, I'm not saying he'll want to leave just because, like they haven't made the Champions League or whatever. But I'm saying that if you can't afford top level attackers and your attackers drop off, and you then go and get somebody like Jota, who's really, really good and promising, but is still young and is not like world class or anything yet, then what you're saying to Klopp is you're going to have to wait another 4 or 5 years before you get a shot at the title, or you're going to be essentially laying the groundwork for somebody else to come in 4 or 5 years' time and try and win the title. And that is then quite a big ask. And it's a little bit disappointing, because I think that without the injuries, Liverpool could certainly have been at least competing for the title this year. And without COVID, I think that they probably would have done some really interesting transfer business this summer and probably competed for the title next year. Now, they may still do that. Everyone may come back to total fitness and the team looks amazing again, and Salah and Mane and Firmino don't drop off, and actually Firmino has a better season. Like, all of that is totally possible. But you don't plan for like the best case scenario, right? You plan for the worst case scenario. And I'm just saying the worst case scenario is scarier than I think people want to admit.
If we look at if we sort of bring it back to their ability to stay within the top 7, because that is still a concern, isn't it? Let's face it. I think
it's not that big a concern, right? Like, I don't like. Do we doubt it? Like, they're still good. They're still better than all these other teams.
Yeah, but then I'd never I maintain that belief as they went and lost 5-6 games on the bounce at home. If that makes sense. I still thought they would. Fair point. Yeah. I was still like, well, they've still got Salah. They've still got like Robertson, Trent. They've still got these players. Like, they've got Alisson, who we've been lauding as the greatest keeper ever in goal. I still thought they'd be all right, and then they just didn't. So I still think if we look at their away trips, they go to Arsenal. Is that a guaranteed win? I don't know. Villa, maybe more so after seeing that Tottenham game. But then Man United, I think Man United have kind of got a knack against some of the tougher sides this year of turning up in that one. So I obviously do think they would. I still think they will finish in the top 7. I think something is going to snap for them as well. I think Fabinho coming back is obviously a huge, huge positive as well. He's probably the best central defensive midfielder in the game right now, in my opinion, for his all-round contribution. So yeah, I do think so, but that has to be their focus. And I don't think one season outside of the Champions League is going to massively dent this Liverpool project. if anything, it's quite an exciting summer coming up for them because, like you said, we've been talking about this for a while. Their top three, they need to do something, and maybe this will be the trigger they need to really go out and mix it up a bit. So for Liverpool, I'm excited, but yeah, I agree with you. In principle, they should be all right for at least sixth this season. I think sixth is pretty good.
Okay, so can I get your order then from 5th to 10th?
All right, let's go. I'm going to go West Ham in 5th. I think they've just got such a good run in. I'm going to go Liverpool in 7th, and then I'm going to go for Tottenham. No, sorry, Liverpool in 6th, and then Tottenham in 7th. I still think Tottenham are going to hold on and beat Everton, Aston Villa and Arsenal to the 7th spot, in my opinion. What do you think?
I'm going to go... God. West Ham or Liverpool? What a ridiculous question to have to ask myself. You know what? I'm going to say Liverpool 5th,
Okay.
West Ham 6th, and then it's a real toss-up for 7th between Spurs and Arsenal. A real toss-up.
You think Arsenal can close the 6-point gap on Spurs as it stands?
Spurs are dreadful, Henry. They've been really bad. Like, I mean, it's not so much that as I don't think they can close that gap and make up the goal difference. Like, in real terms, they're 7 points behind, right, because of the goal difference. So I'm going to say Spurs, Arsenal.
If it helps, Spurs finish the season away to Leicester. They've got Villa, Wolves, Sheffield, Leeds, Everton and Man United between then, and Newcastle as well, which we'll take as
and Arsenal have Liverpool and Chelsea and Everton, and everyone else is in the bottom half. So it's fairly even run-ins, like I'd say. Spurs have actually got a more winnable one, but they've also got the Carabao Cup. Arsenal have the UEL. It's difficult, right? So, but I think I give Spurs the edge there. So I go Liverpool, West Ham, Spurs, Arsenal. I'll say Villa. I think Villa will improve with Grealish coming back. Then Everton.
All right, so we've actually gone for the same three between 5 and 7, just in a slightly different order, which I thought would be different. Okay, wow.
It's a real toss-up as well. West Ham, Liverpool. It really is.
God, is this what the North London derby's become? Scrapping for 7th and 8th.
That's exactly what the North London derby's become. Like, are you serious? Like, the one good thing about it, though, from Arsenal's point of view, is everyone's having a terrible season, and their best player has been a 19-year-old. Whereas Spurs, their two best forwards are having incredible seasons, and they're still in this position. That's troubling. But the Spurs squad is way better than Arsenal's, so I mean, like, you know, who knows? Well,
I've got a theory. Now Xabi Alonso looks like he's entering the managerial game at Borussia Mönchengladbach. I reckon he's going to come to Spurs in a few years' time and complete that, like, the most aesthetically pleasing kind of Premier League managerial lineup possible. And I'd love to see him like battling up against some of these like Spanish wizards like Arteta and Pep at some point. That's my little like hot take, I reckon.
Well, I'm intrigued to see it. I mean, like, if he's one of those guys who you always kind of felt could turn into a good manager because he just seems intelligent. You know, like Gundogan now. Yeah. Like Gundogan seems like one of those people. Like, when you hear him talk about the game, you're like, oh, you're smart. Like, this could be interesting. Then again, I felt that way about Kompany. I don't know how he ended up kind of doing. I did, but then Henry did terribly, and now he's kind of done well. So, like,
no, did you really think that Henry was going to be a good manager? I never ever thought that he was going to be a good manager.
I don't know if I thought he was going to be a good manager, but I thought he's intelligent enough to be a good manager. Like, he was always an intelligent guy. Like, the question was whether he could get over the other parts of his personality which are less helpful. Like, for instance, he is pretty short-tempered. He's pretty arrogant. Like, I wondered if he could get over that stuff to become a good manager, because you need to be patient, right? And it looks now like having that disaster at Monaco and going off to MLS has helped with that. So I think sometimes, like, these guys who are just like, I was a superstar player, need to come back down to earth and realize that it's not enough to have been a superstar player when you become a manager. You need to actually like have an idea of management as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Steven Gerrard's probably the best example of balancing the two, because quite clearly I think he was like, I am Steven Gerrard. That like doesn't matter anymore. It's now just like fully focused on winning. And I think certainly I've seen clips of Henry on the touchline at Montreal sort of barking orders, and it is a bit cringe, if that makes sense. It's a bit difficult.
Yeah,
like, his just utter frustration that the players aren't doing what he might perceive as simple things. But yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see what happens next. But of the next generation of managers coming through, it is amazing to see what Gerrard's done. But yeah, I think that pretty much concludes our 1 to 8.
I think so. I think so. So before we finish up, I'd just like to get a little anything but football from you. If there's any books or films or TV you're watching at the moment, or a skill or a hobby you're kind of developing in lockdown. Obviously, we're all like, you're missing tennis. I'm kind of missing tennis as well. Bouldering.
Bouldering.
At least now it's sunny. Like, so I'm not as. I don't feel like today I'm quite looking forward to a run, whereas like the last few months I've been dreading exercise just because I'm like, Christ, I've got to go outside and it's freezing.
Yeah, I've been mountain biking with my dad sort of midweek, which has been quite fun. It's been a nice thing to do.
Cool.
He's got an electric mountain bike, so he's able to like bomb it. He like zooms up the hill, and I'm sort of desperately panting behind him, trying to keep up with him. It's good. It's good for him at his age. But actually, I tell you what, I watched. I rented off off Prime. Judas and the Black Messiah, which is one of the hot runners for the Oscars this year with Daniel Kaluuya.
Yeah.
And genuinely, I can't encourage people to watch it enough. It is so good. And I've always been. I love the cinema. I think that's probably one of the things I'm missing the most right now. I absolutely love going to the cinema and the whole experience and whatnot. And I get furious when people suggest to me that it's a dying industry and whatnot. And I was really upset. It's like vinyls, isn't it? Like, people love vinyls. People are always going to love the cinema. If you like it enough, you'll go do it. But I've always been skeptical about renting a movie from home, if you know what I mean, because I feel like I'm then enabling, because a lot of film companies have been waiting for this moment, the moment where they can bypass cinemas, just stick stuff online and get people to pay. They've been waiting for this a long time. They're not crying about this particularly. Like, the relationship between film production companies and the cinema is fascinating in terms of like the sort of uneasy dynamics between the two. But anyway, I really wanted to see this Judas and the Black Messiah film. Really interesting look at like the Black Panther movement in Chicago. I rented that, and I really, my whole family, we all sat down and watched it together, and all like absolutely awestruck by it. I can't encourage people. I think it's a really important film as well in terms of what's going on in the world, etc. I don't know if you've read into it or seen it, but yeah, it was really cool.
I've read a bit about it, and I'm quite looking forward to seeing it, but I'm also a little bit unsure because a lot of the stuff I've read has been about like the way that it kind of accepts the police's account of what happened with the Fred Hampton assassination as gospel, when it definitely isn't. You know, like, there are things that happen in it, you know, with like the Panthers kind of like shooting first and stuff, which is extremely contested. And so there's a little bit of controversy around it there. And also, the funny thing about it with the Oscars, of course, is the Oscars, in their attempt to be not, you know, hashtag Oscars so white this year, the Oscars have made themselves inadvertently look way more racist than previously, because they were like, oh, this is great. We've got two amazing actors in Judas and the Black Messiah, Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield, and we can nominate both of them for Oscars. But they nominated both of them in the supporting actor category, which means that apparently Judas and the Black Messiah has no lead actor, which is one of those things that in an attempt to look woke, they've ended up looking way more racist, which is kind of funny to me. But that's really like the perfect encapsulation of the problems with the Academy. But yeah, I'm still intrigued to watch it. Like, I still want to watch it because everybody says it's like a beautifully made film and the acting's really good. But I think, like every historical film, you've kind of got to do that little bit of reading, haven't you? Like, before or after, so you kind of know what's true and what's contested.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I'm reading like If Beale Street Could Talk at the moment, and I've been sort of digging into a lot of James Baldwin's novels there, which is like a really fascinating kind of look at the same culture. So I completely agree. You've got to take it with a pinch of salt. But in terms of just even just making you think and stuff like that, I think it's well worth a watch.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, that's a great recommendation. I will probably get round to watching it with the wife this week. Thanks very much for being on the podcast today, Henry. Really appreciate it. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we say goodbye?
Oof, just keep checking out our Explained series. I think from a writer's perspective, it's been a real pleasure, sort of getting to sort of deep dive into a bit more issues around football. So yeah, check out the Explained series across both platforms, and yeah, keep supporting.
Cheers, Henry, and thank you to you guys for watching or listening from home. We'll catch you obviously next time on the podcast. So
can I just say, I don't live in a mansion. I want that made
Henry.
very clear.
Henry lives in a wing of a mansion. Like, I mean, right. That's what we should say.
Brilliant. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Henry. Bye.